So, friend of the channel is back with another FNAF video, and as you can see by my little ribbon here and the party time headband, I kind of wish it was Pete's Time from Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire. As you can see though, it is my birthday. So, to celebrate my birthday, might as well do something that I love, which is obviously FNAF. Now, obviously you would have done FNAF stuff anyways, but having birthday as well kind of makes it a little bit extra special. And a couple things I want to talk about before we get into this weekly FNAF video. Couple things. The Secret of the Mimic VR game, or at least the VR port, is out. And it seems like a lot of people hate it. It's pretty controversial. And me, myself, I have not played it. The only thing I played is the actual Secret of the Mimic console port that came out in June, July. You can see, go to the archive channel right now and you can see the actual playthrough. Obviously, watch it after this FNAF video, but we have either the actual episodes in parts, or we just recently, last week, uploaded the full 10, 11 hour playthrough all in one video. If you want to fully binge it, you can go do that. But it seems pretty controversial because a lot of people are hating it, saying, oh, this is the worst FNAF release ever. It's like, really? The worst FNAF release ever? Were you not here when Security Breach came out in 2021 of how people were giving death threats to Steelwool and saying how Scott Cawthon made a mistake by giving his beloved IP to Steelwool? Because if you remember, Security Breach was the first game that Steelwool made themselves. Previously, Steelwool did, FNAF VR Help Wanted, but FNAF VR Help Wanted, for all intents and purposes, no disrespect, that is an adaptation for, FNAF 1, FNAF 2, FNAF 3, stuff that already pre-existed. Security Breach was the first project that Steelwool was making themselves, and the release was horrible. I remember it was getting comparisons to Cyberpunk 2077, and if you know of what that means, of when a game comes out and it's compared to a Cyberpunk 2077 release, that is not good company to be compared to. So it's like, oh, this Secret of the Mimic VR port is the worst release ever and the worst thing to happen in the FNAF community. It's like, were you not here for Security Breach? And again, I was one of those people who was not a fan of Security Breach when it came out for that reason. Now, was I going as far as death threats? No, I think that's a little bit too far. And I just think Steelwool personally, they saw Security Breach as, since it was their first official product they were doing from the ground up, they got a little bit too expansive, too bold, and they quite literally just bit off more than they can chew. That's always been my mindset, my viewpoint. And I feel like ever since then, with the Ruin DLC, with the FNAF VR Help 1 and 2, with Secret of the Mimic, I feel like they have now learned what works and what doesn't, and they started to learn to scale back and work and focus on stuff that works versus trying to upscale everything. But you know what? Secret Breach is disappointing, and I will always be in that camp. I will always reminisce fondly, but also in a negative way, that Security Breach was the biggest game to come out, and honestly one of the biggest projects ever. I would say it's that and the FNAF movies, which that's just another thing I want to talk about before we get into the FNAF theory video. Is Security Breach was the biggest game to come out of this franchise, and it's one of the biggest products to come out of this franchise in general. Again, the other thing I would say is the movie. And it's tragic because FNAF started out as this, rogue indie game development series that was made up as a startup by this one guy who was a failing indie game developer. A couple of years later, the reason why Security Breach was so impactful is it was being featured at a PlayStation showcase. And not only that, but obviously views aren't everything. But I will bring this up that following the PlayStation showcase on the YouTube, the Security Breach trailer from the PlayStation showcase had more views than like God of War Ragnarok. So just to show you like how big and how hype Security Breach was going into that, that should tell you right then and there how big Security Breach was. A series that started up as one guy, a failing indie game developer, to now be at a PlayStation showcase, and not only that, but get more YouTube views than God of War Ragnarok. That's coming off of the 2018 God of War, which won Game of the Year over Red Dead 2. That should tell you of how big Security Breach was, and it's a shame. But myself, I don't think Secure the Mimic is the VR port is as bad as people are saying. I think that's just another example of the internet being hyperbolic, where we either absolutely love this and praise it as a masterpiece, or we absolutely hate it and it needs to be, banished to the darkest pits of hell. And there's no in between. I think that's just another example of that. The internet just riding another trend. Now, another thing I want to talk about is the FNAF movies. And while I was in here getting my gear to celebrate my birthday, so to speak, I was walking around Walmart, and because that's where I got this, by the way, not Spawn. And I was walking by, and I saw both the FNAF 2 movie and the bundle of the FNAF 1 and FNAF 2 movie bundles, like on display cases. I didn't buy it. Believe it, I would have. But the thing is, I've already bought the FNAF 1 and FNAF 2 movie bundle already, so there's no point in me buying it twice. You get what I mean. But the reason I'm bringing that up is I've thought about it. How do I feel about the FNAF movies? Am I satisfied? Like, what is the vibe? Because obviously we know the FNAF 1 movie, critics hated it. A lot of people bashed it. FNAF 2, people even more bashed it, and it was even more hated. Me, myself, I have personally enjoyed both movies. I think they're fun, especially I've now gone back within the last month and rewatched both of them, and I think they're a fun time. Now, do I think the movies are perfect? No. And I feel like I've been very vocal and very consistent with my thoughts on these movies, and my main criticism is I wish the movies were scarier. I wish they were able to show violence, and I wish that, this is birthday wish, by the way, I wish they were able to show off a lot more. I think it is a tragedy, honestly, that you can watch a Marvel or DC MCU movie, a superhero comic book movie, and those movies show more action and more violence than a FNAF movie. I think that should not be a sentence that I utter. And the reason I bring this up is, I go back to my thoughts of leading up to the FNAF 3 movie, and I don't feel like I should have this expectation that, FNAF 3 is going to be totally different. It's going to be the movie that changes everything. FNAF 3 is going to be the movie that actually shows violence. Because it's like, we've seen FNAF 1, we've seen FNAF 2. I think it's pretty safe to say what we can expect from FNAF 3. And am I going to have Am I going to have a fun time with it? Yeah, probably. But, yeah, I do wish that the movies were scarier and they're able to show more violence, more gruesome stuff. Obviously, I've been vocal about this. My dream project is a high fidelity, rated R FNAF movie. Doesn't even have to be by Blumhouse. It could be by anybody. I will gladly fund and pay for a rated R FNAF movie, just so I can see my vision come to light of I want to see actual animatronic body horror. Because, you know, for all the memes and the jokes we make about Five Nights at Freddy's, it is a dark series, and it does get into a lot of dark themes. Like, for instance, this is a series where it's about child murder. This is a series where kids are stuffed into spring lock animatronic suits that are like hulking like 10, 11 feet tall, and the spring locks and other robotic endoskeleton parts inside the animatronic skewers and rips open the child's body, and they bleed out from the inside. Like, it gets dark and demented at times, but you don't know that because the memes that go around FNAF and everything. So it's like, when you see movies come out and they don't show any of that dark or twisted stuff, it disappoints me. It disappoints me a little bit. But at the same time, though, I also think about it this way. I'm happy that these movies come out at all. And what I mean by that is the FNAF movies, they have been in talks, you know, this huge will we, won't we relationship for ever since FNAF 3, when FNAF was at the peak, like, internet YouTube popularity in, like, 2015. That's when the FNAF movies were first announced to be made by Warner Brothers, and not only that, but Chris Columbus. I don't think it's Christopher Columbus, the adventurer. It's Chris Columbus, the director of the Harry Potter movies, like the, you know, kid ones. He was supposed to direct the FNAF movies, but then he cut out because of, I think the term is creative differences. So I'm happy that we got the movies at all. But second of all, I think I'm happy that we got the movies when we did, like a decade later. Because I can totally see a world where Warner Brothers sees this very new IP that is very popular on the internet, like 2014, 2015, and they turn around within a year and make a horrible movie just to ride off the, quote, like, internet trend and internet fame of FNAF. Like, I feel like I am happy that we waited years, so it's not just a studio not caring about the franchise, not caring about the IP at all, and just, again, making a movie within a year, going as fast as possible, not caring about anything, but trying to ride a wave and effectively ruin everything. So I'm happy in that front. Again, do I wish the movies were better and scarier? Yes. But also at the same time, though, I can also see a world where we get the movies in like 2014, 2015 by Warner Brothers. They turn around these movies within a year to ride the internet trend, and I would say, without a doubt, I feel pretty confident saying this, the movies will be worse. I would say I'm going to take off this headband, because for all intents and purposes, it's a kid's headband, and I don't think that will be comfortable putting it on in addition to the headphones. So, let us hear FNAF 6 versus Sister Location.
I know it's a bold claim to make, but, like, hear me out. I've been thinking a lot about how Sister Location might be incredibly relevant very soon in Five Nights at Freddy's, as in the next game. And recently, I got 2 questions to the podcast that might show us exactly what we're going to see in that next game. And if they're right, it could shake up everything we thought we knew about Sister Location and what William Afton's goals for that facility were. Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. Now, I already hear some of you. For where we are in the story, why would we be going back to Sister Location? Well, it actually has a lot to do with what we see at the end of Security Breach Ruin. And frankly, I've talked about this plenty on the channel, so I'll be very brief, but we should, for the sake of today's video, go over it. At the end of Ruin, we see Cassie running away from the FNAF 6 location through a series of caves and ending up in a room with a scooper. Now, not every room that has a scooper is going to be the sister location scooper, and frankly, this machine looks a lot different than this machine, which I went over in this video, and you can see right here, there's actually a good reason for it. But it seems likely that whatever this facility is, it was at one point the sister location bunker, and we get that from the layout we learn within Secret of the Mimic. In that game, we learn
Not only that, but a couple things I want to touch on as well. Sister location has definitely peaked as far as interest goes as of recently. Security Breach, we obviously have that sister location living room in that hidden room in the Pizzaplex, which, why is that there? That's still a question that we still don't know. Whose room is it? Is it Henry's? Is it Michael Afton's? Is it a room that Gregory hides in? Is it Vanessa? Like, we still don't really know what that sister location living room is all about. Is it the actual room that Michael Afton goes to in between nights in sister location? Is it just a mock-up inspiration of the original actual living room in the FNAF 4 house? Who knows? But also, a couple more things. FNAF VR Help 1 and 2, it also dives a lot into sister location. For instance, when you boot up the game, you go down the same sister location elevator that you do in the start of every single night. In sister location, you go down that same elevator shaft. And we talked about this time and time again. Is the FNAF Ruin ending with the scooper tied to the sister location scooper? Is the same, and what are the implications of that? And not to repeat every single detail that I've said, because I've said this, I'll be honest, I've honestly lost count of how many times I've mentioned this. But just for a Cliff Notes summary of what that means, if it is true that they're connected, that then means FNAF 4, sister location, which is FNAF 5, if this theory is correct, because it's talking about FNAF 6, Security Breach, Ruin DLC, Help 1 and 2, and Secret of the Mimic are all connected and built on top of one another. So just chew on that for a second of what exactly that means if these rooms are connected. All those games are connected.
learn that this entire facility was built by Edwin Murray an incredibly long time ago, all a part of Murray's Costume Manor, and the secret experiments he was doing with the Mimic at the time. But he built the entire fake pizzeria we see in FNAF 6. He built the tunnel system that connects it to Sister Location, because he built underground laboratories underneath what would eventually become the FNAF 4 house. This plot of land that MCM is on eventually becomes the plot of land the Pizzaplex is on. And if we look at a house on a hill, well, what does that look like besides the FNAF 4 house? And since we know Sister Location is underground somewhere near the FNAF 4 house, the fact that there are a series of underground laboratories right next to the house that becomes the FNAF 4 house, it all is so direct. It's basically confirmed that this layout was reused by William. I know this is a lot to just throw out so rapidly, but all I'm trying to say is that there is a lot of precedent that FNAF 6 and Sister Location are connected, or are at least nearby facilities underground that were at one point connected via tunnel. So if we see Cassie running away from the FNAF 6 location underground, and not coming above ground, but ending up in a facility with a scooper, it is pretty fair to assume that she ended up in some version of Sister Location. But that's old news. I've been saying that. Plenty of people have been saying that. Why might this next game that could take place at this location change everything we know about Five Nights at Freddy's? Well, with a fairly subtle and sneaky, but incredibly likely, retcon. One that, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't mean we were wrong about anything, doesn't materially change anything, but recontextualizes what we thought we knew, and includes the new lore we've just received. Alright, I've teased it enough. What the hell am I talking about? I'm talking about the fact that only 40% of you guys are actually subscribed. So it is completely free to do, and it really helps out the channel if you could just drop a sub. I do this every week. I got editors to pay. Please, if you can, like, comment, and subscribe. It does wonders more than you know. Okay, though, for real, like, get to the point. Recently, on the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, the weekly podcast I have on this very channel, I answered 2 questions that, when combined, could not only be fully accurate to the next FNAF game, but like I've been saying, if they're true, it changes everything. So what are these questions? The first one is from Unusual Carrot, and he reads, Proto Freddy's, the prototype Freddy Fazbear's Pizza we see in Secret of the Mimic, is the sister location observation room.
Ho! Ho! Hold up. Let me look this up. This probably looks very awkward, so apologies. But as you can see, I'm doing all this on stream in real time. And believe it or not, I may know a lot, and FNAF may take up a lot of space in my memory, but I do not have these images saved on my computer for the foreseeable future. Okay. So, as you can see, sorry, my camera's blocking it, but this is, I want to say it's night 3. It's either night 2 or night 3. I want to say it's night 3, but regardless, it's a night 2 or night 3 of this location where you're interacting with Funtime Freddy and you're trying to restart power to all these rooms. That's what these red half circles are. And you have to listen very carefully, make sure Funtime Freddy doesn't kill you. You get the point. If you've seen the game, you know what this is. But Circus Control, Circus Gallery, Funtime Auditorium, Ballora Gallery, Parts and Service, Elevators. Like, that is all fine and good and well and dandy, and that's the stuff that you see while playing this location. But then you see Observation 1 and Observation 2. Right? And, I don't know how else I'm gonna do this, but observation rooms, as you can see, I don't know if it's very easy to see or make out in the video, but you see how in the blueprints of this restoring power, there's like a white border outline on a lot of the stuff. But then there's a grayed out, less obvious white outline on these other rooms. Right? I don't know if I explained that clearly, so let me show you. So you see the thing of what I'm beside or on top of in the cameras. It's a very obvious white outline. It's very clear. But then you look to someone that is to the right of me, and it's more faint. Meaning that it is built on top or beneath. It's connected, but it's not on the same level. Now, that probably doesn't make much sense, and you're probably thinking, oh, well, why does that matter? Well, it matters because these aren't just random rooms or just random blueprints of random rooms that are built on top or underneath the bunker, because look at the one that's beside me. 4 doors to the left, to the right. You're sitting in the back, and there's one thing sitting in front of you. Does that not look a lot like the plush trap hallway of the Fun with Plush Trap minigame in between nights of FNAF 4. Because there's 4 doors on the side of the hallways, and you're sitting in the back. What about this one in the top right corner? Sorry, it kind of gets blocked off. But you have one on each side on the left and right. The left and right doors. In the back is the bed, and then in the front is the closet. And you get to this one where this is the outside of the FNAF 4 house that's to the right beside me, because you go down this long horizontal pathway, then you go up vertically to Fredbear's, the pizzeria establishment. So all this grayed out locations is stuff that you interact and see in FNAF 4. So the observation rooms being tied to the underground pizzeria bunker in Secret of the Mimic and not FNAF 4. It's very interesting. All right, you know what? I'll listen to it, I'll bite, and let's see what this is about.
I'm not going to go over all of my evidence for this, would be one long email, but here are some bullet points to get you started. Identical layout and theorized to be in the same location. Help Wanted 2's Princess Quest being a literal direct foreshadowing. Williams' discovery of F10N4 kickstarting a base of operations. Everything already pointing to Sister Location 2 being the next game. All being said, I believe it makes perfect narrative sense, having shown us the humble beginnings in Secret of the Mimic to what became of the horrors of Sister Location. In other words, this theory is supposing that the room we play in the ending of Secret of the Mimic, that prototype Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, is the same room we can see on the cameras in the Entered Night and Custom Night of Sister Location, to the point that the private office itself is the security office F10N4 is inside of. And truth be told, at first, I was not too sure of this theory, because on one hand, there is a lot of merit to it. As is mentioned, the layout is frighteningly similar. This is the camera layout of Sister Location, and this is a top-down view of the prototype Freddy's Pizza.
Let's see, this is the horizontal. I guess these are the 2 pathways. This is the bots where you see F10 and 4 Fiona. And then there's a panel off to the left and off to the right. And it's also slightly bigger. Yeah, maybe. I can see, I don't hate it. But to me, another reason why I go back to FNAF 4 and why it's very interesting is look back to this. Not only is the map layout identical to what you play in FNAF 4, but see also these gray dots in rooms. For instance, the one that, again, is right beside me in the camera, the path to Fredbear's, there's 2 gray dots. And what do we see when we're actually in the pizzeria in between nights in FNAF 4? We see a golden spring Bonnie and a spring Freddy. 2 dots, 2 animatronics. Then we go down here. The white grayed out bots at the very bottom of the hallway could very well be us, because that is where we are positioned in the night. The grayed out bots at the end of the hallway is Plush Trap. And then you're probably thinking, oh, well, what is the 4 grayed out squares in the doors in the hallway. And you are right, there aren't 4 additional animatronics that show up in the Fun with Plush Trap minigame. But people believe that those 4 doors are tied to the FNAF book of the original trilogy, the 3rd book, the 4th closet. So I'm not really going to dive much in details there, but that is an explanation that I've heard of. So I'll bring that up. So there is an explanation for why there would be something labeled, even if we don't see it. And they go to the top. You have 1 grayed out bots in the middle, Fotsy in the closet, and then you have 2 other grayed out squares in the hallway, one on the left and one on the right. Bonnie's the one on the left, and Chica is the one on the right. And then the more white out bots could be, again, us. It could also be the Fuddles Funtime Freddy, Funtime Freddy. The little mini Freddys that are sitting on the bed. So again, FNAF 4 does get explained in this blueprint. So I'll bring that up as a counterpoint.
Pizzeria in Secret of the Mimic. They both have the private office, a hallway on either side, a side room for each hallway, connected to a larger room at the top, and a vertical vent in the middle. Granted, this is not exact. I want to be clear on that. The vent isn't exactly the same, and the prototype Freddy's Pizzeria is a lot larger than the room we see in Sister Location. Now, these are minor issues, and there are ways to work around it that we'll go into, but I just want you to not think that I'm blind. I see the differences. As he wrote, Princess Quest 4 is another great piece of evidence. I mean, the fact is, it's a minigame that starts in the FNAF 6 location, goes underground in the game, and then to exit it, you have to take the Sister Location elevator up. Inexplicably, you're in this minigame, in this digital world, and then suddenly, the Sister Location elevator. That's weird, and they never explain it. But maybe this is the explanation. Now, I've already mentioned in this very video that it seems incredibly likely the next thing we're going to do in the FNAF timeline is go and rescue Cassie, who was last seen around these ruins, which are likely to be Sister Location. Add that onto the fact that I discussed here that Scott gave us a teaser for what they're working on. A sequel, specifically not a 3, a 2. So not Help Wanted 3, and realistically looking at the franchise, it only makes sense to be either Sister Location 2, Security Breach 2, or FNAF World 2. And as much as you should always bet on FNAF World 2, right now I think Sister Location 2 makes by far the most sense.
Also, being honest, Security Breach 2 could easily be Ruin. Like, yeah, it's a DLC, but Ruin is so much of, like, its own entity, its own game. You can view it on its own. It's a lot like the Elden Ring versus Elden Ring Night Rain DLC, where Elden Ring Night Rain, you can look at it as its own individual game because there's so much unique individual stuff that's unique to that game alone that it feels like its own game. And I know that because Elden Ring Night Rain, despite me not being a huge fan of Elden Ring, but I will acknowledge its popularity, was up for Game of the Year, despite it being a DLC.
There's all this potential lore in this area that Cassie was last seen in. Not to mention, like Unusual Carrot said in his email, there's way more evidence than just these 4 bullet points. Take, for example, the minigame selection of Help Wanted 2. It's unclear exactly what the minigames are. Like, in Help Wanted, we are very clear from the start this is all a VR game, but Help Wanted 2 seems to be taking place in the real world, so in that case, what are the minigames we're accessing on this computer? Are they security camera footage? Are they memories of the player? We're not sure about that. Regardless, it's interesting to note that an entire section of it is inexplicably dedicated to Sister Location. There are FNAF 6 minigames sprinkled in. It's the nurse minigames. There are Fall Fest minigames sprinkled in, which is strange, but sure. And the majority of the minigames are things that could have happened at the Pizzaplex to begin with. That all makes somewhat sense. Then why is it that the, going by the layout, last section of the game is entirely dedicated to Sister Location? To the extreme that if you're going for a normal playthrough where you collect all the presents, the last minigame you would play if you're going in order from left to right, top to bottom, like normal humans do, the last minigame is a boss fight against Circus Baby, arguably the main character of Sister Location, and arguably the main antagonist of Help Wanted 2. I mean, hell, the game starts with a shadow silhouette jump scare of Circus Baby. Why is she so present here? But if this is the room connected to the private office of Sister Location, suddenly that influence makes a lot more sense. Now, admittedly, at first, one of my big hesitations with this theory was this room double dipping. The idea that this room is almost guaranteed to be the FNAF 6 fake pizzeria. I mean, when we see it in Sister Location, it's on lock. Everything inside of there is stuff you could have purchased during the Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator. And then in Ruin, we go in the rooms around this room, and there's burner rooms, rooms with these big fiery burners at the bottom, which would have been perfect for Henry Emily's plan. Something to lure everybody in and burn them up. So if this room is meant to be the FNAF 6 pizzeria, which is all but guaranteed, then it can't also be the private office for Sister Location, right? That was my main hesitation when I first read this question, but as I think about it more and more, who's to say it can't? Sure, if we're just going off the layout map of Sister Location, this room is too small, admittedly. But there are ways around that. This map is anywhere from 5 years to decades later, so maybe the room was renovated, maybe not all the room was fully needed, maybe the map's not accurate, maybe it's a small retcon. We can't not consider the possibility that it makes more sense story-wise for this to be the same room, and if the only issue is that on the cameras the map size isn't correct, that's a pretty small retcon in the grand scheme of things. And then if we go off of visuals, it fits perfectly fine. I didn't realize this because I didn't play that much Custom Night from Sister Location, to be honest, but the rooms we see through the cameras of Custom Night are already kind of pizzeria themed. The floor has checker tile on it. The walls have that classic Freddy's strip along the side of it. So it already kind of looks like a pizzeria. Why can't it be the same pizzeria? Now, I do hear another counterpoint. If the FNAF 6 pizzeria is the Sister Location private office area, why would Molten Freddy and Scrap Baby come back? Wasn't the entire point of Sister Location that the Fun Times are so sick and tired of being stuck down here, they would do anything to get out? Why would the next place they go to be right back down to the bunker? Well, they both have proper motivation, because they both think William Afton's down there. Circus Baby, or at that point in the timeline, Scrap Baby, is dead set on helping her father, William Afton, accomplish his plans. She thinks his goal is to put everyone back together and bring them all back to life, and she'll do anything to accomplish it. We hear her say this directly at the ending of FNAF 6. Everyone remembers the peak monologue that Henry gives at the end of Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator, but a lot of us sometimes forget that monologue starts with connection terminated for a reason. First, Elizabeth is yapping. It begins with Scrap Baby going on about how we fell right into a trap. This was all for William. William's gonna put us all back together. This was all his doing. And then she's told how misinformed she had been. But she came here willingly. She thought that William Afton was here, and part of the grand design was to get to William Afton so he can fix everybody. So then that's why she would go down there. She thinks William's down there. It's all part of the plan. She might not have even wanted to leave the bunker in the first place. She might just have wanted to seek out William Afton. Molten Freddy, on the other hand, is a bit different. But to be fair, Molten Freddy, at least from the death lines we get in FNAF 6, seems to be fairly aware of the familial relations here. You know, we got the, a big happy family, a bunch of mentions like that, I hope I'm not late to the party, and similarly, if Molten Freddy is the thing that becomes the blob, which seems most likely, then we know that Molten Freddy wants desperately to kill William Afton, which, you know.
Molten Freddy is very, very difficult to talk about because you have to remember that it's not just Funtime Freddy attached to Molten Freddy. It's not just like a reskin like it is for like Circus Baby or Scrap Baby. Molten Freddy has the endoskeleton parts of Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, Ballora, and it's still very, very up in the air of whether the Bon Bon hand puppet is tied to Molten Freddy at all. So it has multiple souls in Molten Freddy. So it's very difficult to piece together what Molten Freddy means. And I think that's one of the reasons why people don't try to solve or try to come to answers of, why is Molten Freddy here? Why is Molten Freddy down there in the FNAF 6 bunker? I feel like, or, why is, part of Funtime Freddy part of the Blob in Security Breach? I feel like we don't ask those questions intentionally because we, as theorists in the FNAF community, we don't know how to explain Molten Freddy, so we kind of just leave him be. It's not really the same token as, like, Balloon Boy, but it's kind of that same kind of level where it's like, yeah, I can't really explain you. You just exist. We're going to acknowledge you exist. How you fit in the story is not as clean as, like, Elizabeth Afton, for instance. So, no disrespect.
Now, we could have probably assumed anyway. It is kind of the Funtime animatronics that he tortured, filled with souls of kids he killed. This thing does not like William Afton. And if Molten Freddy thinks William Afton is down here, I would not doubt if that's the reason it so willingly comes. After all, Molten Freddy seems to be fairly agile in this weird, wiry form. It might be able to sneak back out once it kills William Afton now, or at least think that it can. So even if FNAF 6 and the Sister Location Observation Room are the same room, then these characters still have a reason to go down there. And this whole facility was put together by William Afton to accomplish his goals, originally, and then was reused by Henry to accomplish his goals. But we know what Henry's goals are, to put an end to all of this.
I also feel like, now that I just thought about it, this is just a theory, but as I was listening, something just brain blasted on my mind for a second. Is, what if a reason why Funtime Freddy, kind of, Molten Freddy, all intents and purposes, goes to FNAF 6 location. Wait, we know why Elizabeth Afton Baby is there, to do her father's bidding. You could kind of explain why Molten Freddy is there in the same way. Because, think about it. What do we know about the Funtime animatronics? We know that they were built to lure and encapsulate kids. That's why they are 8, 9, 10 feet tall. That's why Funtime Freddy has, like, voice mimics and audio lures and sound illusion discs. And the wiry endoskeletons in the, once you peel apart the hollow shell of the animatronic, it's capable of outright scooping a kid's body from the inside out, because we hear about it in, I want to say it's the first Fazbear Frights book, and it's one of the stories, part of the book Into the Pit. It's one of the short stories of how a girl is stuffed inside Funtime Freddy, and, Funtime Freddy pretty much just lists all the ways that, she's gonna die, and he's gonna, like, kill her by doing this and scoop her insides out and everything. But what do we know about the Funtime animatronics? We know that they're built to lure, capture kids, scoop them out, and harness their remnant to lead to William Afton's goal, trying to lead to immortality. So, with that in mind, knowing that's what the Funtime animatronics are made for, and Molten Freddy, again, is the combination of Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, Ballora, the remnants of Ennard. And again, the Bon Bon hand puppet is a little bit loose cannon, not really too sure about that. Since their goal is to lure kids, capture them to harness remnant, you can make the argument that's why they go to the FNAF 6 location, because, they're trying to follow up with their goal for William Afton, trying to go to this new pizzeria, FNAF 6, trying to capture more kids and lure them. That could be it. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but I would say if you had to make an explanation of why Funtime Freddy slash Molten Freddy slash, you know who I mean. That's the best explanation I got. So let me know what you think. Or if I'm just way off base, which could also be true.
The question is, if this truly was a massive pizzeria that we now know that it is, what were William Afton's goals? Why would he do all of this? Well, that goes into one of the pieces of evidence from this email, and majorly into the evidence of the other email I've yet to bring up. What was that other email I received? Truth be told, this email is actually about a different question, but it's the context this person gives about their question that I want to discuss today. The question was sent in by Ginger on the Patreon, and it reads, so I've had this theory rattling around in my head for a while, that an upcoming game might reveal / retcon that Ennard was the Mimic all along.
Ennard was the Mimic. First glance, I don't like it. I said this in my introduction in the first few minutes before we actually did our playthrough of Secret of the Mimic, of this is one of the questions that I want to answer to find the truth about the Mimic going into playthrough, is ever since the Mimic has been introduced in either book form with the David storyline with Tiger Rock, or outright in games starting with Ruin, a ton of characters are tied to the Mimic, and it's gotten to a certain point where, it's like the Syndrome quote from The Incredibles where, hey, if everyone is super, nobody will be. Well, if everybody's tied to the Mimic, then nobody's tied to the Mimic. Because, think about it. Think about how many characters, at least theory-wise, never been confirmed, but theory-wise have been connected to the Mimic. You have the outright Mimic from Ruin and Secret of the Mimic. Okay. You have Glitch Trap. Is it the Mimic? Is it just a computer virus? Is it William Afton himself? What is he? Helpy with an I from FNAF Security Breach Ruin DLC and FNAF VR Help 1 and 2. Help with an I, that's a very important distinction. He's tied to the Mimic program. Charlotte the Puppet could be tied to the Mimic program because they are using a poltergeist to haunt the Cicada Breach Pizzaplex. That in turn would then lead to the animatronics from Cicada Breach are also tied to the Mimic program, which we do know that's a fact because of just a few simple facts of that's the reason why Freddy doesn't attack us as Gregory in the beginning of Cicada Breach, because he was booted in safe mode. Meanwhile, the other animatronics were evil and attacking us because their servers got all hacked and corrupted, causing them to go evil and rogue and try to attack us. They're tied to the Mimic program. So, and I'm sure there's other characters I'm forgetting, but do you see the problem with that? This character, this character, this character, this character, all tied to the Mimic. To me, not everyone can be tied to the Mimic, or not everything can be explained by, oh, it's just the Mimic. That's what's going on here. No, that's stupid. Stop. Right? Stop it. Get some help. The Mimic cannot explain everything and be tied to every character, because then what's the point then? Right? It makes it less special. It makes it seem very small. It's not in the same token or in the same breath, but it's the same problem I have with multiverse stories where, death has no consequences, where, hey, if someone dies in a multiverse, they can just be snapped back to life and you just plop them back into existence and you pretend that's the same character They never died. It never gets brought up, and you just act like that was the same character all along, and they never really died. So death has no consequences. And if death has no consequences, what's the point of getting invested in the multiverse then?
We know that the first 6 in-universe games were based on some amount of truth, but could have been influenced by misinformation or creative misinterpretation. And I can see how the Mimic could have been creatively interpreted to be an amalgamation of robot parts and spirits rather than a complex AI endoskeleton. And to me, this is very interesting. Now, straight away, frankly, I don't fully agree that Ennard could just be the Mimic. These seem like too much of a separate character. We see the Mimic in Secret of the Mimic, and we see it in Ruin, and it looks generally the same the whole time. The idea that it looked like Ennard at any point doesn't super track. Not to mention, the flowchart of Ennard to Molten Freddy to the Blob makes too much sense for it to be the Mimic, and then Molten Freddy came out of nowhere, and then turned into the Blob out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't add up. But what is worthwhile to bring up, and what does get me thinking from this question, is to think about what the Funtime animatronics truly are. They're incredibly advanced animatronics, capable of mimicking speech, with exoskeletons that can morph around a bit, and endoskeletons that are able to move throughout the exoskeleton, move outside of the exoskeleton, form together, and change their shape enough to fit inside of Michael Afton. Do you see where I'm going with this? I don't think that Ennard is the Mimic, but it seems like the Funtimes were made in the Mimic's image. So what does this mean? And what would we learn in this new FNAF game that changes everything? Well, let's put our evidence into the oven and see what kind of horrors rise. Once all that Mimic nonsense was settled and the secret was out, William went to collect his spoils to see exactly what he had purchased, surveying the land and the facilities inside of it, and he found more than he dreamed he ever could, namely F10N4, a supercomputer which seemingly housed a perfect recreation of the mind and personality of Edwin Murray's late wife, Fiona. Quick aside, I know and you know that F10N4 is not a perfect replica of Fiona. F10N4 is way more robotic and servient to Edwin, but let's be real, it was the 70s, William probably didn't know the difference. Okay, that's all, I just wanted to be clear about that. Not to mention the Mimic itself. I mean, an endoskeleton this strong that can fit into any animatronic suit it wants to, that can mimic any voice and personality you give it or show it, that would print money for William Afton's business. Because keep in mind, at this point in the timeline, as far as we're aware, no killings have taken place. Sure, some employees have died because William Afton is an incredibly scummy businessman, but he's not an outright murderer yet. His main goal is probably still to have a successful pizzeria, and the Mimic seems like a golden ticket to that opportunity. So now he has F10N4 and this M2 endoskeleton, and needs to understand exactly how they work so he can thrive his business. So right here, William Afton sets up his base of operations, the private office, the same room that F10N4 is already in, to study the Mimic, learn how it works, and try to make one of his own. He leaves the Mimic in this pizzeria, the pizzeria that it already enjoys being in. I mean, think about the bad ending for Secret of the Mimic. When it catches us and kills us, it puts us into an animatronic and lights up the show, and just stares at us. I think the Mimic genuinely enjoys being in here, to an extent. And this is something that F10N4 likely knows and could have told William Afton, so he can study it from the safety of the private office. Which is why this private office is set up to observe and defend itself from the rooms in front of it. Because you're defending yourself from the fake pizzeria the Mimic was once housed in. And it's right here that the Funtimes were developed. William Afton was obsessed with making this Mimic. For one, like I mentioned, it prints money. But I wouldn't doubt if part of it is jealousy. We know how William Afton acts in the books when he realizes that Henry Emily is a better inventor than he is. He becomes obsessed with Henry and tries to do what he did and fails. I'd bet that William...
And that's one of the reasons why we believe that may have been one of the linchpins causing William Afton to lash out and kill Henry's daughter Charlotte because of pure jealousy. Again, none of this has ever been confirmed, but that's always been an interpretation that seems widely accepted. So I'm just going to bring that.
William Afton is doing the same thing with Edwin. The Mimic is something William could never create on his best day, but he drives himself crazy trying to recreate it, trying to make his own to prove not only that he can, but that he's better than Edwin Murray. He didn't need him anyway. And his best attempt was the Funtime animatronics. Endoskeletons that can somewhat change their shape as well. Ones that can mimic voices. Ones that have set personalities, but not quite to the tier of the Mimic. At the end of the day, Funtime Freddy is Funtime Freddy. And they're not able to put on every other animatronic suit they'd want to, but they can move around a little bit. They can slither around and change their shape slightly. I mean, look at the Funtime endoskeleton. This thing looks insane. Like, we don't talk enough about how weird the Funtime endoskeletons are. Look at Endo 01, Endo 02. That's an endoskeleton. It's bare bones, it's metal plating, it does what it needs to. Is this a realistic endoskeleton? I don't know. Do I look like a scientist? No. I'm in a goddamn 10 by 10 office recording videos about FNAF theories.
Meanwhile, I'm in my living room of my apartment.
I don't know robotics. But what I do know
I'm not a whale biologist, damn it.
is this kinda looks real, and this looks like insane tubing. So maybe this is why. Maybe the Funtimes are William Afton's best attempt at recreating the Mimic. And it's precisely because of that that allows them to, much later in the timeline, shed their exoskeletons and form into Ennard. Their endoskeletons might not be fully malleable in the weird way that the Mimic is, but they're able to conglomerate and form one body, and then change the shape of that body to fit inside of Michael Afton. That sounds a lot like a Mimic. Now, I'm not saying Ennard is the Mimic. This endoskeleton, I do believe, is a separate entity, but I think it is devilishly ironic that Edwin's best invention is still holding pretty strong 50 years later, but William's best attempt at recreating it not only failed, but then was sent to the same place the Mimic was in a non-canon ending, and eventually degenerates and transforms into Molten Freddy, into the Blob, into something that would become William Afton's true downfall. A mass of wires dedicated to making sure he stays dead. And I think this is what we're going to learn in the next Five Nights at Freddy's game. Sister Location 2. Going through the old ruins of the Sister Location bunker and seeing it for what it really is. Seeing how it was connected to the FNAF 6 pizzeria, as it was all a part of that original underground facility built by Edwin Murray. Hell, maybe the FNAF 4 experiment chambers are somewhere nearby too. It's all been connected, way before child possession was involved. Well, I guess not fully, because David is a whole situation. But the remnant experiments, while they happened here, they happened much later. At first, it was just William and his obsession with not being the second best inventor under the Fazbear brand. So, that's the theory. The idea that Sister Location was much more connected to the FNAF 6 pizzeria than we ever thought, and that in doing so, William Afton was trying to recreate the Mimic, which is where he created the Funtime animatronics. It makes a lot of sense the more you look at it, and the more you look at it, the more evidence comes to light that backs up that claim, especially if our next game is going to be Sister Location 2, where we could learn all about this and finally understand why William Afton was down in that bunker in the first place. But let me know what you...
Interesting. I would say as we are wrapping up here, I am one to believe that, yeah, the next game we do get, which hopefully is... That's knocking on wood, not a door. So don't be alarmed. But I am of the firm belief that Sister Location 2 is going to be the next game, and I do hope that it comes out this year. I'm not too hopeful on it considering it's now May. We are nearly halfway through the year, and we haven't even gotten a trailer for this new game, yet alone a release date. But hey, if it did come out this year, I would love it. Obviously, I would play it on launch, on release, and I would have a really, really good time with it. Because I personally had a really fun time playing Secret of the Mimic when that game came out. But I would say if it is true that Sister Location 2 is the next game, that's where we are going. I would say one thing I hope for, if we are going back to Sister Location, is can we get some explanation for Circus Baby's Pizza World? Because again, that is something that we still have not seen to this day. Because remember, the Sister Location bunker is not where Baby and the other Funtime animatronics originated. It was originally supposed to be Circus Baby's Pizza World, and also like in addition to like an ice cream parlor. That's what it was. But it had to be shut down and closed after one day due to a gas leak. But really, I think the more logical and sound answer is the reason why it was closed is because, well, one of your animatronics kind of killed not only a child, but your daughter in broad daylight during business hours. And they're like, oh, first day, a child's already dead. All right, we're shutting them all down, and we are locking these Funtime animatronics down underneath the FNAF 4 house in this hidden bunker, and they will never be found again. So, can we see the Pizza World? Can we get some context there? Because I don't know about you, but I think that would be nice. But I don't know. Let me know your thoughts, what you think.